Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. Very excited, new face. We got Chris joining us today. I am pumped. It's going to be a great conversation now. While I am excited, y'all should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all of that good stuff to get your emails in the morning whenever we go live, which is of course every day. Now, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means put them up in the comment section and we will engage those directly throughout the show. And other than that, today we are going to be talking about perspective. And to gain some perspective, let's first get an intro. Chris, why don't you give us 10, 15 seconds? Who are you, where you come from, all that good stuff, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Hey, good morning, guys. My name is Chris Strom. I'm a retired NYPD Intel Sergeant, former Marine. Although I'd say you're really never a former Marine. I'm 62 years old, and I live in the beautiful rolling hills of Roanoke, Virginia, and happy to be on the show with you guys.
Awesome. Looking forward to this convo. It's going to be good. So, like I said, perspective. This is what we're going to be talking about. And I have a definition. Perspective. Your perspective is the way you see something. If you think that toys corrupt children's minds, then from your perspective, a toy shop is an evil place. Perspective, in a direct definition, is a way of regarding situations or topics, etc. It's the appearance of things relative to one another as determined by their distance from the viewer. So that's another piece of that. But when I talk about perspective, what are your first thoughts, Chris? I'm going to put you on the fire. What do you think?
Yeah, well, listen, perspective is a lot like attitude and how people view things. And it comes down to probably a lot of imprinting and upbringing, what you like, what you don't like, and your thoughts on certain things might be different than other thoughts. It really, it's like religion and politics. Everybody's got an opinion, but not everybody's opinion is worth hearing about. So, maybe mine is more gravitated to a different age demographic than it is with your guys. I'm sure it's different than what my children's, which they're in their mid-20s, what their perspective is on certain things in life. But I think, in general, we all have a sense of what's right and what's wrong and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in terms of, how we interact with people and things.
I like that. Shaun, what are your first thoughts?
Well, my first thought is looking pretty good for 62, buddy.
I
I'm 60
appreciate
years.
that.
I'm
I
60
appreciate
years old myself, so
Good on you. Good
I
on you.
think that between the two of us, we might have a little bit more perspective than Chance, and that's just age. It's not that Chance hasn't lived a good life or a bad life or a full life or an empty life. It's not about that. The longer you live, the more perspective you have. And even a year will make a difference in perspective, particularly if you're trying real hard to gain perspective. So how you spend your time, what you do with your time, how you think about time. And as you get older in time, you tend to pay more attention to time. So I think you get more perspective on the back end than you did the front end. So I think we might be able to talk about a few things in this show today.
Maybe one or two. Well, my first thought on this is, gaining perspective, because there are lots of people that I know that at your guys' age that have zero perspective. They have the exact same thought pattern, same thought process as they did when they were 20. So, right off the bat, I'm going to come back to you, Chris. Here, how do you gain perspective?
Well, I think in life there's a lot of ups and downs. I mean, no, I was talking to somebody the other day. Nobody really gets through this life unscathed. So I've had a lot of setbacks in my life, and I've had a lot of success in my life. And I think really, to be honest with you, and they say it's been said many times before. I think when you experience failure, success is much more appreciated. That's just for me. Many times I had to do things twice to get what I want in life. Sometimes three and four times. It just really had to apply myself. I was never really an exceptional student. So where some people never studied and got 95s and 100 on a test, I studied and applied myself, and I was happy or surprised when I got an 88 or a 90 on a test. So that's a perspective for me. Certainly when you have children, in the beginning, I must admit, I was kind of selfish. My wife and I was like, wow, this is life changing. And I've gone from, being the me to being the them, meaning my children and my wife. So that perspective has certainly changed with age, and the experiences in my life have changed me, and really taught me how to appreciate things a lot more.
Absolutely. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Well, you raised the point of kids, Chris, and that's kind of cool because right now my wife and I are over in Malaysia. We've been on the road traveling for, I guess, just coming up on a month now. And this is our first trip without our boys. They've traveled around the world with us. They've been to lots of places. We're used to having them with us, but this is our first time away from them this long. And you know what? Those little knuckleheads are irritating when I'm around them every single day. But the moment that they're not around for a month, I'm missing them. So, perspective is something that, as they say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And so this trip has been kind of fun to be away from the boys and a whole lot more cheaper, I might add. But the idea of, we miss our dog, we miss our boys, we miss friends, we miss our ski hill, we miss our mountain bike trails, we miss all of these things. But we're having a great time over here, and now we're in Singapore. We're having a great time over here, but absence from the things that we take for granted on the regular will give you perspective for sure.
Interesting. I was thinking about this earlier. I was speaking to Marsha. We had her on the show a little while ago. I was on her podcast yesterday, and we were talking about perspective and the fact that, a lot of the things that I look back on in my life now, 10, 20 years down the road, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe I did that back then. But that is the perspective that I think, at least that I look back on and say, hey, you know what? If I'm not doing better than I was last year, let alone 10 years ago, let alone 15 years ago, then I'm doing okay, because I should be growing, I should be developing, I should be continuing. But I think the act of actively looking back on your history and then assessing how things work kind of delivers perspective. And were there any particular times throughout your life that were like really hard lines in the sand, or definitive moments that gave you that kind of perspective? Chris, coming back to you, what do you think?
Well, I could tell you, I had a certain perspective of the Iraq War, and then having spent 15 months there, it really changed me. I'm an American. I love this country. I love the guys and girls in the military. There's no bigger fan. But when you see some of the things that were going on over there, and again, when I was there, I was 48 years old. So definitely the perspective and the lens that I was looking at things is clearly different, like I said, than when I was younger, 20 years old. And that kind of perspective was a shock. Some of the things that I saw going on over there. The soldiers are soldiers. They're just great people, across the board. But some of the things that was going on from the leadership perspective was really disheartening. I'll just leave it at that.
Absolutely. Shaun, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts, and we can go in a couple of different directions, I suppose. So the first thought is to build up what Chris said. When I was in the military, operating in Tier 1, not everyone was at the leadership level. And I'm not speaking specifically when Tier 1, but you get a certain amount of clarity when you start operating at those kind of levels. There's some pretty disappointing stuff going on within the Canadian Armed Forces as a whole. But I didn't see that when I was a young buck, a young private going through, whatever stage of my young military career. You just don't see it. You don't understand it. You can't see the clarity of it because you just haven't got enough skin in the game at that point. So leadership is something that you learn to get better, and you learn to gain clarity on, both internally and externally. And I guess the second piece is, speaking of the military, when I was a young guy coming up through the system, a lot of things, I was enamored by a lot of things, and certain things were really appealing to me. But as you move through those stages of your military career and you start, cracking them out of the park, as it were, you can kind of look back and think, why was I so excited about that? Or why was that such a big deal? Or while I'm doing it now, it doesn't seem that hard. And so timelines and adversity and velocity tends to give a certain perspective on what is hard and what isn't, and what is possible and what isn't, or more correctly, There's nothing impossible. It's just a matter of how much velocity you apply against it. And so I find myself now, a lot of young bucks in my Instagram DMs hitting me up with, hey, how do I get to be you in the next 2.5 weeks? I'm 17 years old. What do I have to do? So there's a certain perspective that they don't have yet, because, you know, they're still trying to find they're still trying to find their favorite ball cap. Whereas, you know, many years down the road, perhaps they'll have a certain perspective on the nonsense that they're talking about now as a 17-year-old. So we could go in either direction. It's fine with me.
I like this. Let's dive down this little bit of leadership role, because I think this is an important piece, and I think it'll apply to what you're talking about with the young bucks trying to bypass some of the things that you need to do in order to get into tier 1. But you know, I remember when I was a junior corporal, and I thought, I know how this place works. Like, why are the things that I see needing to be done not being done? And it wasn't until I actually started working in the head shed that I started gaining that perspective. And do you think that there is any way to actively gain that perspective without having to directly experience it? Let's put it that way. Chris, what do you think?
I don't think so. I'm one of these people that I'm very visual. You know, if I read things, I can understand it generally speaking, but I think I have to experience it. You know, I'll just talk about, you know, mechanics and things with cars. Like, I look at a lot of videos. Thank God for Google. You know, because if you need to fix something, it could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a car. You can pretty much find a video on how to fix it. So in terms of the leadership, I have to experience it. I have to see it, and for me to understand it and appreciate it. And a lot of that is maturity. Let's be realistic. And a lot of that is upbringing. You know, like when I was very young and I went into the military, you know, my whole world was a 5-mile radius. I really didn't experience any different cultures, different peoples. You know, I lived with my grandparents, so I was kind of sheltered. And you know, when you get into a group of people from across the country, it's just different. And you could read about that, and I'm sure you could read about that and gain some insight. But you know, like Shaun's a perfect example. He's traveling Malaysia. I mean, it's probably great to read about Malaysia, but it's totally different and holistically different. Being there, eating with people, interacting with people, and looking at, you know, different cultures and speaking with people in person in front of you.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that, you know, Chris raises the case study of me being over here in Malaysia. You know, you can read about it and you won't understand it. You can also be here and not understand it unless you've been through enough of life or enough perspective that when you're walking down a street, you're absorbing the 360. If you're not situationally aware, all you're seeing is what's directly in front of your very tight arc of your Mark 1 eyeballs, and you don't see anything else. You don't feel anything else. You don't smell anything else. You're not aware of what's at your 6 o'clock or your 3 or your 9. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. If you've lived a good life, it's a good life to just look directly ahead. But our lives weren't that. I was on the 360. And so what I see in front of me, I also see behind me. And so if you're situationally aware, you're absorbing massive amounts of bandwidth. All of the data is being absorbed like a black hole. You can't even stop it. It's as offloaded as blinking and breathing. You're not paying attention. You're just absorbing the data stream. And if it's a really busy place, like we were just downtown Singapore this afternoon, there's so much stuff going on there, and there's so much consumerism and noise, and everyone's doing their tourist thing. And at a certain point, it's fatiguing, man. I'm just kind of tired of it, and I'm done. I don't want to be around it anymore. I could be around it if I had to be, if it was mission priority, but I'm absorbing so much bandwidth that my perspective is I don't need to be here anymore. I want to bounce because I've absorbed enough. I know what the deal is, and I want to move right along. And so a lot of people don't experience that because they're not battle space situationally aware. And if I could turn it off, if I could flick a switch and just go straight into the very tight arc that's immediately in front of my nose. It'd be fun, I suppose, but I wouldn't want it. But it sure would be an easy way to live at times. But again, I wouldn't want it as a perspective. I hope that makes sense.
I think that's almost like an ignorance is bliss kind of thing. Chris, you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's great what Shaun's saying because being a cop in the NYPD for 20 years, I'd like to think I'm situationally aware and how I viewed things early on and so forth. But yeah, it would be nice sometimes to turn the switch off. I'd be lying if I didn't say so, because what ends up happening for me, especially if I'm with my family, not so much by myself, because I'm really more. I wouldn't say I'm as situationally aware, but I'm less. I'm down to probably level 6 or 7 instead of 9 or 10 when I'm with my family. So I don't really. I'm not so concerned about myself, but my children, especially when they were young, very concerned, and to the point where my daughter would say, "Dad, you're hurting my hand," as we're walking through the parking lot of a shopping mall, because I'm not letting go of you, and because I just, that's just how it is. But getting back to the different perspectives and looking at things, when you're with your kids, especially when they're younger, and this will probably be your experience, Chance. When you go to like a theme park, like I'm just using Disney World as an example, and you see the excitement on their face and how they're interacting with this. I mean, like, it's overwhelming, like emotionally. It's just so much fun to see them having fun, as opposed to when you were maybe, first with your wife or your significant other, and you're going there as a couple. The experience is totally different. It's similar, but it's totally different in terms of appreciation and perspective.
Absolutely. Shaun, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm with Chris. I mean, you being a NYPD cop that long, of course you're going to be situationally aware, maybe even more so than I am. But again, it's not a competition. I think you only need to achieve a certain level of situational awareness that's enough. And so I think you've got enough. And so you raise the next amazing point that if you're just floating through NY by yourself, it's pretty easy peasy. Same with me. If I'm just floating through Singapore by myself, it's pretty easy peasy. But when I'm with my wife, it's not that I'm responsible for her at all. I mean, I'm not the patrol commander and she's my 2IC. It's not about that. But as soon as someone's attached to my hip, I'm responsible for them in my mind, whether they like it or not, and whether they're more competent than I am or not. I just can't shut it off. And even if I could shut it off, I wouldn't shut it off, because it's an organic thing to me. It would be like, hey, do you just want to give us your right arm for the day? That'd be cool. I want to keep my right arm, and I also want to keep my sense of responsibility. I also want to keep my situational awareness. And another fun piece is that doesn't matter who it is. It's not my wife now that I'm using as the individual for the example, but she acts as a good proxy. It could be anyone. I can move through the world easily enough that sometimes I just watch the world through their motions. I watch the world through their eyes. I watch the world through their interactions. I watch their excitement, or I watch their startle, or I watch their smile, or I watch their frown. It doesn't matter what's going on. I will compartmentalize myself, because I can do the world without thinking, and I'll entertain myself, but not like a circus act. I'll entertain myself with the fact that I can view the world through someone else's life, as it were, and it just adds a little bit of rich tapestry to mine. And it's also, as I like to say over here a fair bit, I like to gamify the game. And my game of moving through anywhere in the world is so not youngly easy, but it's so easy that it's fun to watch it through someone else's life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I kind of want to dive into this a little bit, and that concept of responsibility for others, and that, I mean, the situational aware thing is 100% accurate. I remember coming back from Afghanistan and I was overly situationally aware. I was looking for things rather than just being aware. And it wasn't until some time had passed that I gained some perspective on the fact that, oh yeah, right, I'm in Canada. It's not it's not Afghanistan. It's not the same thing. But the concept of having responsibility for someone it's interesting because I don't hear it from from people that aren't in military, first responders, police, that kind of thing, because I don't know if that sense of responsibility kind of exists outside of those realms. I can't say it doesn't exist, but I don't see it as often. And from talking to my friends who aren't involved, they don't really have it. So just recently, my youngest, starting to be independent and wanting to do stuff on his own, he wanted to run off to the bathroom all by himself, and he's 6. And my immediate thing was like, you want to run through a mall by yourself, into a bathroom by yourself? That's a little tough. But in the moment, I had to take some perspective and look at it and say, okay, well, he wants to push his boundaries a little bit, but I'm still responsible for him, so I'm going to allow him to push his boundaries, but I'm going to keep a watchful eye on him. And so I'm wondering, do you guys notice that as well from the other people around? Is that you have to almost check yourself, especially dealing with kids or significant others or someone that you're attached to, and that responsibility, that you have to kind of rein yourself in to not be overly, trying to think of the word for it, but protective, I guess. Chris, what do you think?
I think it's almost like a maternal instinct from a male perspective, if that makes sense. I just wanted to tag on to what Shaun was saying. When I'm in an airport, and I know both of us, all three of us have spent a fair amount of time in a layover situation, I like to people watch, and I like to try and gain insight to, like, all right, I look at this person, what does he do for a living? Where is he from? Where is he going? Try and guess which gate he's going to be. And then you watch how they interact with people at the ticket counter. Are they polite? Do they say please and thank you? So I'm constantly looking at people's body language and their interaction with other people's. Are their kids, very, very polite, or are they holy terrorists? Where the mom and dad are constantly looking at them from 30 feet away as they're running around terrorizing people. So, I think for me, it's just one of those things where when I see people, when I interact with people, it's always interesting. It's always fun. But getting back to, the question of perspective and things, I just think that the age has a big bearing on it for me in terms of how I view things.
Absolutely. Shaun, any thoughts on this?
Well, I'm going to echo what Chris just said. I'm very much a people watcher, and I don't know if I was created to be that through, that whole sniper thing, or if I was created, through on a playground. I don't know where I was created to be that way, but I can sit down for an hour and people watch. It's best if the world walks past me as I'm sitting and watching it, rather than me walking past the world. Maybe I'm lazy, but I can sit in an airport and watch and not move. We just came out of a city called Malacca, and there's an area in Malacca called Jonker Walk, and it's quite popular with the tourists. You just cross across a little bridge, and I was on the other side of the bridge, and I just sat my butt down on a piece of cement and put my camera up and I hyperlapsed for 45 minutes, just kind of ignored my camera, did a little hyperlap loop, but I ignored the camera. I was out of camera, and all I did was sit in the same spot and actually zenned out. I did a little, folded my hands on my lap and didn't move and watched the world go by. And like you, Chris, I was assessing. I wonder what they do for a living. I wonder why she's doing that and he's doing that. I wonder if they've got kids. I wonder if they travel. I wonder how many languages they talk. And, as an NYPD, you would probably, sometimes it's referred to as profiling. More or less, I think of it as building a rapid story about someone in order to get in front of not the problem, but in front of my curiosity, so that I can start rapidly building it out in, half a second or a second. And it's not that I'm right all the time, but what I did learn to do in the military was rapidly assess who's in front of me, either through an optic or through a naked eye, and build a rapid story in a rapid we'll call it profile, in order to start building out potential outcomes, or building out, are they going to move left? Are they going to move right? Are they going to stand still? Are they going to squat? Are they going to get on comms? What are they going to do? And it's not that, as I sat there in Malacca, I was, categorizing who's a problem and who isn't. I simply view the world in a way that maybe not a lot of people do, except for my buddies who were in the same game as I was. And I know for sure they do, because we talk about it. And maybe there's other people out there that aren't in the same professions as you were, Chris, or I was, Chris, or you, Chance. Maybe it's a natural human instinct. So if it is a natural instinct, I don't think it becomes obvious or a split-second profile build-out unless you get to work. You start doing your homework. You start practicing it. You start asking yourself the question, what is this person's story? Bam. What is that person's story? Bam. And that bam can take 30 seconds as you look for all of the nuances as you're first starting off the game. But many decades later, and again, I'm not saying I get it right every time. I won't even give a number of the percentage. I don't know. It doesn't matter. What does matter is, in the blink of an eye, I profile someone. And it's not that I'm doing it for ill will, or I'm doing it for wrong. I just do it because I not only like it, it's not entertaining. It's just a thing that I've been doing for so long that I love people watching. So again, to your point, Chris, when it comes to airport layovers, or sitting on the sidewalk, sitting in a coffee shop, walking down a mall, I'd rather lean against a mall wall and watch people walk by me, and just look for the granularity in them in order for me to kind of absorb their story, if you will. And so now, Chance, you had asked about, your son, 6 years old, off to the bathroom, and you want to apply that parental, sort of almost maternal, not control, but wanting to keep them safe. I think there's a way to do that, to let the little knucklehead run off to the bathroom and feel independent and adventurous, and he's out there slaying that dragon all by himself as he runs down the mall, or saunters down the mall, or sticks his greasy nose up against the candy floss window, whatever the case is. I think there's a way to do that without being a goof, and you can just say, all right, meet me back here in 5 minutes. Here's the deal. You'll meet me here. The moment that we lose sight of each other, you'll always come back to where we were both together. So no matter what, whenever we separate, we always meet back where we both were. It's a simple little plan. It works on patrol bases. It works on mission. It works on all kinds of things. If you're both jumping off the ramp of a CC-130 and you both flippity-flop the wrong way, no problem. You're going to meet up where you were supposed to meet up on the ground. Stick to the plan, and the plan can be really simple. You can enable your 6-year-old with a simple, all right, I'll meet you right there. Don't take too long. So you put it on them to deliver, rather than you kind of constraining them into that tight little framework of, all right, here's the deal. Mission briefing, situation, mission, execution, service and support, command and SIGs. You don't have to do that. Just a quick, give them the power to be able to do what is good for the team, I find works best.
Yeah, and that's come through perspective, right? Like you have the it doesn't come through perspective. It comes through the experience of doing it, I guess, incorrectly multiple times, I would imagine, or through the and this is the thing, is basically what I did was that I said, okay, well, I'm gonna wait right here. I'll be here for when you go, and if you get distracted or anything like that, come back here, always right here. And he ran off and did it. But there was this, I had to really rein myself in from wanting to control the situation. And the perspective that I took in that was the fact that he's got to be able to do these things on his own. And I have to not do things for him, otherwise he's never going to gain the perspective that he can do things on his own. And I think it's an interesting point, in the fact that if we don't allow ourselves, to make mistakes or allow others to make mistakes, then we never really gain that perspective. So I'm wondering, am I on base with that, or do you think that it's off kilter? Chris, what do you think?
Oh, 100%. People, again, I'm just using myself as an example, but I think as a general consensus that if you don't have failure, you can't appreciate success, and you don't realize that the failure actually helps you get better, because most people learn from their mistakes. Unfortunately, there's a big segment of society that doesn't seem to learn from their mistakes. But I think most goodwill people learn from their mistakes in terms of morality, in terms of their job, in terms of whatever kind of profession they're in. I wanted to touch back, if I can, with what Shaun was saying about, looking at people, engaging people. I did interview and interrogation, and I build a psychological and behavioral snapshot of people immediately. And when you're out on the target, you have very limited time restraints in terms of how you're going to effectively apply any kind of skill set. When you're in a traditional law enforcement environment, you're in a static environment. You have a lot of ability to reach out to different metrics. But when it's just you and the other person, the bad guy, I'm just using myself as an example. You hear the voice. I'm sure we've all heard the voice. Like, there's something that you get a gut feeling about this person, that he's either telling the truth and he's good, or there's something that I can't quantify or identify that he's bad. And there's something there. And I'll just use this as another example. If you've gone to weddings, and I'm sure we've all been to at this age, several social functions, weddings, and you're sitting around a table and you kind of gel with people and you try and make interesting conversation. And then there's this one person, could be a guy, could be a girl. For me, a lot of times it's mostly guys. I don't really pay too much attention to the women because I don't perceive them as a threat. There'll be something off about the person. I've never met him. I don't know anything about the person. And then a year later, or maybe even sooner, I find out, yeah, he was cheating on his wife, or he got arrested for tax evasion or whatever. And I told my wife, and my wife would be like, you were right. She'll be the one to tell me, like, oh, you remember that person so-and-so? And I'm like, so I try not to apply that in a social setting, but unfortunately I can't let it go, because if I let it go, then I'm not going to get it back. I'm afraid that I won't get it back, because I do believe it is a perishable skill set.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on that?
Yeah, Chris is right. I mean, you both have to gang up against me to make as many mistakes as I have. I mean, it's redonkulous, the amount of mistakes that I've made. And I've said it before, I pursue failure now rather than pursue success. Success will show up eventually, but I love kind of failing. It's not that I set myself up for failure, but I just chase things so hard that I know it's just going to be like 1 million fails in the next X amount of time. And it doesn't bug me at all. I'm used to it now. And I think it, as I've said before in the podcast, it might have been when we had Tim Turner on, but my Army sniper course, not my Special Operations sniper course, two radically different things. My Army sniper course was it was a palm slap every single second upside the head of failure after failure after failure. Not big failures that removed me from the pipeline, but enough failures that sometimes I didn't even know if I was going to be there the next day. Like, I mean, really concerning moments where you're hitting the rack at night, pretty fatigued, wondering like if you're going to be doing the kit bag drag the next morning. And I think that's good it was good for me, for sure. It taught me not to stress failure or stress about failure quite as much as I had pre that course. But then before that course, things kind of come to me pretty naturally. Maybe I'm lucky or whatever, I don't know, but I wasn't failing as much as a lot of people around me. But when that course came down, it came down like a freaking anvil on my head. And man, it was a wild ride that I felt like I was hanging on by my fingernails. And that taught me a lot about failure. It taught me a lot about myself, and it taught me how to get better at accepting failure. And so now that I'm easier to accept failure, I kind of pursue it pretty hard. It doesn't mean that I want to lose, because a relentless competitor. As I think I said in yesterday's or last night's podcast with to Mike, man, freaking bring it, boys. Like, if you want to start designing the very best Frisbee in the world right now, and we've got 24 hours, I'm going to smash on you guys. I'm going to totally smoke you on the Frisbee design. I don't know how to design Frisbees, but I have a competitive nature. So I don't mind getting after it, and I don't mind failing. And I suppose those two combined or joined at the hip can take you a lot of places.
Yeah. Chris, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Shaun is saying. Just from a book perspective, trying to get my book out, I can't even tell you how many letters and emails and phone calls and non-responses I got from people in the literary realm. And it's not something I have any familiarity with. And it took me 10 years to get published. So when you talk about failure and getting smashed in the face, I have a lot of experience with that. You get a million no's, they say, before you get your first yes. And so again, getting back to appreciating things and perspective, I wasn't pursuing failure, but I became more accepting of it when people didn't return my phone calls and didn't say, yeah, we were not interested in publishing you or even speaking to you. And I'll just relate one story on a personal level. I was involved with a writer, and this relationship went on for about 2 years. And then suddenly I got a text message. We're no longer interested in the project. I won't mention his name because the show is on a positive up level. But the point of the story is I'm sitting in my recliner chair feeling sorry for myself. I had texted my wife and told her about, my disappointment. And my son comes up to me and he, sees me sitting there, and I'm quiet. It's not like I'm boo-hooing or anything. And then he says, Dad, you can't quit. You said two people that don't quit, Marines and the Strums, and you can't quit. So with that, I was like, holy smokes. And he's probably about 10 years old at this point in his life when he said that to me. And sure enough, I made a phone call, and I don't even want to go too far down the road, but I get a phone call and the person actually calls me back. And then, kudos to my son for telling me, get up, and don't quit and things like that. So, but perspective, success and failure.
I like that. It's interestingly, I find this interesting that very young children can have a very excellent perspective on things that adults don't have, right? And there's lots of examples of times where my kids have mentioned something to me from a completely different perspective, and I'm wondering if it might just be a height thing, like maybe they're looking up at things differently, but the concept is that if the three of us have similar backgrounds, right? You have military service, all these things, but we're all coming from different realms. We're all looking at the world through our own perspective, which is going to be slightly different. And I guess really what I'm wondering is was there a point in time that skewed your perspective to a degree that you had to okay, this is totally wrong. I need to readjust my thought patterns and restart kind of deal. Because there's been a number of times that I thought I knew what I was doing, and then I got shown that I did not know what I was doing and had to completely reset, re-engage from like a baseline position. Have there been any points in times where your perspective was challenged to that degree that you had to really reset to baseline and kind of start over? Chris, I'm going to come back to you. What do you think?
I think so. I spent almost 5 years on and off in the UAE, primarily in Abu Dhabi and parts of the time in Dubai. And I thought I was culturally aware with the Arab people and the Muslim faith and things like that. And that being there with people, interacting with these people and learning about their culture and their friendly nature and their level of intelligence, that totally changed my perspective, because I'm watching the news and a lot of it is very negative. And then when you get immersed with people like that and you're there for an extended period of time, I wasn't there 5 years continuously, but on and off for over 5 years. You learn a lot about the Arab culture, you learn a lot about their customs and their practices, and they're learning from you as well. And then there's a genuine, when it shifts from a professional relationship to a personal relationship where you're having coffee with these people off work, in a social setting, you really learn a lot. And I think that changed my perspective a lot in terms of, their culture and my lack of cultural awareness to the Arab culture.
Absolutely. Shaun, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I dig that. And Chris is right on point as far as I'm concerned. Taking this vacation just as a case study, a month in Malaysia, which is generally speaking considered the melting pot of Southeast Asia. It is really full of many ethnicities and religions and all of the good stuff. And we've been exposed to so much. This is a crazy little side tangent, but a couple nights ago, my wife and we've walked through, I don't know, we've been doing a lot of walking through this country and several cities, and we've passed by several hundred reflexology or massage spas that some of them I don't think are super legit. And, based on the girls that are out front who are saying, "Hi, sweetie, you want to come in for a foot massage?" And so there's a lot of places like that throughout the area. And it's been fun to walk past all of them and think, not a chance. But finally I'd walk past so many, and so had my wife, that we decided we were going to get after it and engage in some reflexology. But we wanted to go to a legit one. And we just happened to, the night prior to that, we'd gone out to a cooking class, so 3.5-hour cooking class with some locals in Malacca. And we paid for the experience, as it were. We hung out in their kitchen. The lady who was teaching the cooking class, her name is Tina. She was running the show, and I've been cooking for about 30 years, and I'm pretty handy in the kitchen. It's not that I'm an amazing cook, but I do all right. And I learned things from her, just her cooking. I learned things that I should have known, but I didn't, and that's because she was coming at it from a different cooking culture. But also, I'm not going to say she's a professional chef, but she takes her cooking serious. And I don't think of myself as a professional, and I try to do my best, but maybe I need to do better. After paying attention to Tina. So towards the end of the cooking class, she said, "Hey, do you want to join us tomorrow afternoon? Come out for lunch with us. We're going to go out to the countryside for a drive, and the two of you, my wife Doreen and I, you're both invited to come along for a drive and come out for lunch with us." And it was then we were kind of being treated like family, like friends. There was no fee involved. There was no favors involved. It was just a really genuine offer to come on out and hang out with them. They enjoyed hanging out with us. We enjoyed hanging out with them. So off we went for this little trip, and had a great biryani, and had a few laughs and all of that good stuff. And as we were driving back into Malacca, just before we got dropped off at our hotel, we asked, "Hey, listen, is there a spot around here that is super freaking legit, that is really just reflexology, that we can go and eyeball?" And she said, "Oh yeah, there's one just right up here. That's the place that I go to. That one's got a good reputation, etc." So I said, "Cool, thanks." We checked it out a little bit later, and right on the door there was a sticker that said, "No hanky panky," right by the door handle. So we thought, okay, this could be good. So we went in, and my wife and I did this reflexology thing, and it was 60 minutes long. And the girl who was, when I watched her walk in, and the room's dark, my wife's right next to me, there's a whole bunch of chairs, but it was just my wife and I. She walks in, it's pretty dark, and she's Muslim, and she's got the headdress on, and I'm thinking, this is going to be easy peasy. There's no way she's going to bring the heat. Well, I don't know, man. I consider myself to be a pretty tough guy, and if we want to talk about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu mats, I've been on them 8 years, and I've done a boatload of other things, but I came within a hair about 147 times of tapping out. And at one point, and not too long into it, maybe 10 minutes into it, I had to go into a mindset that was, "You will never break me. There is nothing you can do that is ever going to break me. I will never tap out." She had the death hands of steel, twisting railway ties sort of strong. And I think it turned into a game, to be honest, where she was trying to break me and I wasn't going to break. So it was a great experience. And that's what our trip has been throughout the entire month, bumping into cultural sort of, huh? Did that just happen? Or what? He said what? Huh? They do what? Huh? That's cool. My month in Malaysia wasn't just a month. It was like almost a decade of cool experiences and eye-opening moments that was a year's worth only because I was fully engaged with everyone who was around me. If you moved half an inch, I was target locking you and I wanted to talk to you. I wanted to engage with them. I wanted to do a knuckle bump or say, hey, what do you recommend? Or how's your day? Or where you're from? Or do you have kids? It didn't matter who they were. If they moved, I was right on it, but not on it like a goof. I was on it like just trying to be cool with them so that we could be cool together. And so I think that's a real important part. To make a long story short, Chris had said in 5 years over in UAE and Dubai at Sadra, 5 years can be a month worth of experience for some people who kind of just go there for 5 years, only go out to their office, then go straight back to their air-conditioned apartment where everything is taken care of in the gated community. They never get out, they never hang out, they never bang with the locals, they never do anything cool with other cool people who can teach them so much more about life, add richness to our lives. So you get a binary moment. You either get in the game or you're hiding in your air-conditioned space and not enjoying the richness of life. So 5 years for Chris was probably 20 years for some people in that respect. So perspective is not just a timeline. Perspective is who you are in the timeline, as far as I'm concerned.
I really love that actively seeking perspective. I really like that. Chris, you got any thoughts on any of that?
No, I think Shaun pretty much encapsulated. I mean, it's, and again, a lot of it is personality driven. There are some people that are introverted, so it's harder for them to interact with people. Obviously, we've all met people that are shy. And it's funny. I try to engage those people, but not over the top engagement. Like, hey, try and make them feel more comfortable so that they do participate in the conversation if it's in a social setting and things like that. But there's just some people that's just who they are. They're not going to change. But for me, once I get going, I'm more like along the lines of Shaun. I like learning things like that. I love talking to people, and when you get, and again, when I was young, listen, when I was a young cop, it was my way or the highway, as they say, and I was very firm. And coming out of the Marine Corps, I was very, very firm with people. As you get older, your perspective and the way you interact, and hopefully your communication skills got better. I'd like to think mine got better, and you do a better job of interacting. But your perspective has to change. And for me, I'm speaking personally. If you can't change your perspective and your mindset and be accepting of other people and cultures.
Oh, I think he froze up. Yeah, I think he's frozen up. We'll get it back on here in a second here. I really do like that point, and I was kind of going to get to that realm. Is that when you're actively seeking perspective, it comes from a place of confidence versus a place of I'm trying to think of the word for it right now, but it's not a big deal. The big one, at least for me, was the fact that when I first gained perspective to be able to engage with other people and to be able to start podcasting or advocating or doing any of those other things, came from a place of being comfortable with who I was. Prior to being comfortable to who I was, I did not have the ability to hang out with people. I didn't have the ability to be in the moment, to really engage in those conversations, to develop that level of perspective, to be able to look at a room full of people and just, that dude, I'm going to engage with that guy. Hey man, what's up? Versus sitting in the back wall, not engaging and not gaining any perspective as well. So that's it's a great point that he brought up right up until he froze. Shaun, you got any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, you got to be able to read the room, and and you also got to know why you're there. So, to your point, sometimes I just want to lean against a wall and not be bothered because the room doesn't engage me, or I don't want to engage the room more correctly. And if it's the right room, then I could spend the rest of my life in it. But if it's the wrong room, I just want to bounce. And so, and rooms shouldn't be homework. Like you shouldn't walk into a room and think, "God, I've got to be here for 4 hours. Are you kidding me?" But sometimes that's the case, and so you've got to find a way not to amuse yourself or entertain yourself, but gain something from it. And I got to say that sometimes it ain't that easy, depending on the room. But I think there's a way to do it, and sometimes I treat it almost like homework. I got to get better at these things, and I'm a handful. So it doesn't mean that I've got everything figured out, because I surely don't. I've only got a little bit figured out, but that little bit is usually enough in the right room that I could spend the rest of my life in it. And so I think that between you and I, Chance, for sure, we're certainly getting better at this whole podcasting thing. We're certainly getting better at reading the room. You definitely are. I mean, and not just in a way that you really sucked at one point and now you're just freaking amazing. But I've seen your growth in these moments. Like, just you're so much more casual now. You're not trying to be anything that you're not. You're just kind of relaxing into not your role, but you're relaxing into who you are at this moment. And a year from now, maybe we'll just both be relaxed into who we are a year from now. And whatever that'll be, I think it's going to be a better version of both you and I. So I think that it's really important what you've been saying recently in recent podcasts, that you're now starting to figure out that you don't have to be anything that you're not. You can just kind of let it go authentically and naturally and not stress it, just as you did like a couple of minutes ago where you couldn't think of the word. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you couldn't think of it. Like, who cares, man? You just casually let the moment go and didn't get all pedantic, twirly, and starting to come up with new bow-fangled words that are unimportant. You just kind of let it go, and it's no biggie. But there was a time not too long ago where that would have been a biggie, and it wouldn't have been a death spiral, but it wouldn't have been pretty. But now it's cool, man. I dig seeing it from you, and I think that it's important that both of us recognize that for sure we have more perspective on podcasting. We have more perspective on how this whole thing is supposed to flowing McFlow. So I think it's good, man.
Yeah, I agree. It was interesting. I've been doing and now I can't think of the word either, the layouts for the YouTube channel on all of the different pieces there. And as I've been going through it, because I'm starting at day one, right? Actually, D-3 is where I started on this, and I've been working my way through all the thumbnails. There's the word for it. Through all the thumbnails to get up to where we are now. And so it's been giving me a point in time to look back at every single one of these shows, at all the guests we've had, at all the different times, different pieces that we have, added on to the collective of, okay, well, now we're going to try this. Oh, that didn't work. We're going to put it off to the side. Try this. Oh, that works. Okay. And then we'll just bolt it in. And it's really developed into this great, what we are today. But yesterday, as I was going through all of them, one of the big pieces I was working on was Men's Mental Health Month. And the amount of stuff that we went through just that month, the amount of people that we talked to. And then it clicked in my head that May 21st was the last time you and I had a show just together. So we've had guests on since May 21st.
Wow, that's right. Yeah. That's because I was hassling you. I kept saying, get some guests, get some freaking guests. Let's slam some guests.
100%. And this was the benefit was the fact that since then, and we have not missed a day yet, and it has been fantastic because it's developed the show more. We've had to engage new people. I've had to bring people in that I wouldn't had previously. It forced me to expand not only my my reach and expand the network and try to bring more people in, but it's expanded my perspective as to who we want to talk to, how we engage with those people. And then of course, reps,
Yeah,
of
man.
just continually doing more and more and more. It's been quite the ride. I'm hoping that Chris will be able to join us again, but his internet looks like it died completely, and he probably won't be able to make the rest of the show, which is okay because he made it through most of it.
It's
That's really
okay.
good. Yeah,
Yeah, well, you know why it's okay, because it's kind of interesting to just have one guest on, because the guest, there's a lot of ground covered with just one guest. It's not that, it was starting to get boring, get out of here. He didn't get left hooked off of the stage, but I mean, I like the dude. I could have talked with him for a boatload more time, but it is interesting with just one guest on how much ground can be covered, or more correctly, how I think, how much I can learn from just one guest. It feels like I'm absorbing 2 hours worth of information from one guest versus having two, three, or four guests on. You know what I mean?
absolutely. The one of the pieces that I noticed when I try to get three people at a pretty standard pace, consistently having three guests on, and two works pretty well. And one, I find it's a more intimate conversation, if that makes sense, because it's just the three of us. And you're right, we cover a lot of ground and we can engage back and forth, and there's a lot more direct conversation. Whereas with the panels, sometimes you're waiting 10, 15 minutes before it comes back around. And there's Chris right there. He's back. He made it.
Damn.
Well, not without some technical assistance from my son. I gotta tell you, I live in the woods, and we just got cable like 2 years ago. I know that sounds crazy. We had DSL, and the fact that Shaun is able to communicate halfway around the world and not have an internet problem is really disappointing for me. I'm just, again, failure. You know what I mean? So perspective.
Yep. This is it. And this isn't today his internet is holding, which is good. There have been a number of days where his internet has not held out.
I mean, last night, there's a whole bunch of travel things that got involved with yesterday's, and at one point I was doing the live chat podcast in the back of a taxi. I mean, it was ridiculous. And then a couple nights prior to that, the entire hotel Wi-Fi and data stream hammered in on both my laptop and my cell phone. So I just grabbed my light, grabbed my phone, ran out of the hotel in my bare feet, and planted my butt down in clear sky. And I was doing a live chat from like next to a tree. And so, listen, I've had a few failures.
Yeah. We were while you were getting yourself sorted and back on the show, we were just discussing that, and the fact that a lot of the times, especially with the podcast itself, is we've had to adjust on the fly a lot because it's live, because of all these other things, and the ability to just kind of flow is a perspective in and of itself, and the ability to just kind of like let go and let's see what happens. And I really love it. But we are almost at time here. Any other thoughts before when you froze, or anything else that popped up in your head while you were trying to get back on?
I appreciate you guys having me on the show, and I think it was a really interesting conversation. And I'm glad we finally worked out our schedules, and we're able to make it happen. I appreciate you extending the invitation to me.
Oh, absolutely. This has been a very fun chat. I'm going to get you back on, and this hopefully we'll make it through the whole show.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Shaun, you got any final thoughts or anything?
Yeah, Chris, thanks for being cool during the conversation. Thanks for coming back into the podcast just like cool as a cucumber, like not even a drop of sweating on you. You handled that one like a champ. And you know what? That's perspective, brother. That is the mark of a seasoned veteran in life, where when things start falling apart or the wheels start coming off the bus, you can still hang on to the steering wheel and drive it safely down the highway. I dig that, man. It shows character. So that's cool. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much, John. That's very nice of you to say.
Absolutely. Now, I I've been neglecting. I've been so involved in the conversation. I've been neglecting some of the comments. So I'm just going to run through these real quick, and then we'll shut her down for the morning. So Lisa jumps in here. Good morning, everybody. Vanessa, good morning. Good to see you. Max Sydney jumps in. Afternoon, folks. Happy to see you've come to realize the EU time zone is the best. Well, there's stories between that. But yeah, Lisa jumps in here and said it would be great if you could turn it off. Interesting. You were all talking about this morning. I was reading about how our brains can't turn off; they just constantly run. Absolutely, very fascinating stuff. We should dive into that. That's a good topic. I think I'll add it to the list. And then she's got a bunch of other ones here. She says, "I love listening to all your stories, and you guys are amazing." So loving this. It's going to be awesome. I don't have much to add to the final except for this. Learn what your perspective is, and then actively seek out new perspectives to then build onto yours, which allows you to grow. And you can do that with us every day here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chimo.